Thanks, Neil, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. I was going to say a few words to just sort of set the stage for this conversation we're about to have. If our panel can come join me here as I'm doing that. Let's see, get this going. But you know, in recent weeks, I've been working on a story about, excuse me, this old reporter's notebook, about technology that taps into people's brains. And that's put me in touch with companies and researchers and lawmakers to understand what's possible and regulation efforts that are underway, because a lot of those companies and researchers and efforts to regulate how brains interact with computers and the hardware to detect that sort of thing are here in California. And at first, when I started working on this piece, you know, I thought a lot about, you know, the types of uses of this technology that require surgery to implant a chip into your brain, which people are doing. But, you know, as Kim will, you know, talk about with us shortly, there are much less invasive approaches out there. Companies are creating devices to connect computers with brains and help people with neurological disorders or detect and predict the meaning of brain waves using AI to do that. And they're exploring ways to use brain data of frontline workers to shape the workplace of the future, starting by measuring things like focus or stress or when you're sleepy on the job. But also using your brain activity to control apps like Slack or Outlook. And a number of companies are continuing to develop tech that can translate the words people form in their brains into text. And researchers at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory here in the Bay are making things like artificial retinas, while doctors and researchers at UCSF can now record the visuals that form in the hippocampus of your brain using hardware. And you know, neural data can allow workers to prioritize big tasks when their brain data says that they're most focused and save other tasks for later in the day. But if worker agency isn't protected, brain data can put bossware surveillance on steroids. It can play a role in how algorithmic management systems operate, but also predict the words that form in their minds about their manager, or influence salary negotiations, or as researcher Nita Farahani predicts, that tech can keep workers from even thinking about organizing a union. So we're going to get into that conversation. You know, and I'm so happy to have our esteemed panel here with us. You know, because California really does play an outsized influence both in the industry that's developing this technology and efforts to regulate it. So let's get into it. You know, before we get into the questions that I'm burning, you know, over here to ask, I'll just start, if we can just go down you know, to the panel here and just talk about. You just tell us a bit more about yourself and how you ended up in doing the work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Kerry. My name is Jerry McNerney. I'm currently a state senator here in California. I spent 16 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. I was chairman of the AI caucus, and I was author of the AI and Government Act, which gives the U.S. government in the GSA capability to deal with AI so that it can help the other federal agencies. I'm a mathematician and spent 25 years developing renewable energy technology. I love to see what technology is doing out of curiosity, but also out of a desire to make sure that it's safe and beneficial.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Old. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Emotive. We're actually based here in California in San Francisco. We're a neurotechnology company really advancing the understanding of the brain through measuring the electrical activity, so EEG or electroencephalography. We're translating that measurement into data and insights that give you real-time feedback on your cognitive load, your stress, your attention, For us, we're really working over the last 15 years that we've been in operation, we've been working alongside researchers, clinics, academics to be able to really advance the understanding of the brain in context. Over the last few years, we've been exploring with to be able to understand how work might integrate technology like this. For us, it's about putting the human at the center, human in the loop. What we want to be able to do is develop and design technology with transparency, consent, and build trust. And I'm here today because we want to engage with policymakers, companies, to really educate them about what the technology can do today, what it cannot do, and what we need to look out for in the future.
Did you say you used to be at the Mercury News?
I did, yes.
What were you
12
doing
years.
there? What were you doing there?
Advertising.
Awesome, amazing. Senator McNerney, really quick, you were on the House AI caucus? Wow, that was the, I was really blown away watching the hearings around this debate of a AI moratorium a couple months ago, and how much that caucus rolled into those conversations. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I co-chaired the caucus with one of my Republican colleagues.
Right.
Our focus in the caucus was just to give information to other members of Congress and their staff about AI, its capabilities, what the risks are, what the benefits are, so that they'll be informed. It wasn't really a policy caucus as much as some of the other caucuses might have been.
Yeah. And Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Sarah Flocks. I'm the Legislative and Strategic Campaigns Director at the California Federation of Labor Unions. We represent 2.3 million union members in the state of California. I like to say we represent everyone A to Z, literally everyone from airline pilots and actors to x-ray technicians and zookeepers. And so in just a quick background, in 2011, we worked with the Grocery Workers Union on a bill that banned taking alcohol through self-checkout. That was us, for all the people who complain about that. And the reason was there was a store that wanted to move into Southern California to be all automated, that it would basically be all self-checkout, there would be no cashiers, it would be a total elimination of jobs. And so in 2011, we saw that that was technology coming in, fundamentally going to disrupt a union industry where a lot of people came up as courtesy clerks and were able to retire. And so we started focusing on the impact of tech on the workplace back in 2011. We've had a number of convenings of our unions and learned about the impact before AI on pretty much every single industry. And so this is an issue we've been working on for a while, although the urgency of it is increases every day. So very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And I neglected to mention in the beginning, we'll be going around and allowing folks to ask their own questions at the end. Sorry to folks who are on Zoom, but people who are here in the room. So keep that in mind. But to our panel, I was curious, how can neural technology and understanding of neural data improve people's lives or lead to a dystopian future?
Yeah, so we've been exploring the use of neurotech since 2018 within workforce environment. Some of the early companies was SAP, Dell, JLL, and was really being able to understand what that human experience is. For us, we have all kinds of incredible technology at our fingertips, and yet how we engage with it is very analog. We're still swiping, clicking, and guessing what we need. But for us, we see a future where through sensor fusion and potentially co-pilots, AI co-pilots, we'll be able to understand what the individual is feeling, thinking, doing in context and have technology help them. So imagine a computer that you're doing your work on. If you're wearing an EEG device or a brain wearable device, can we detect cognitive load or cognitive overload and have the computer help to set forth the work that you're doing that requires the most focus? Can we change the temperature of the color and the light on the computer? Or in IoT offices, can we adjust the thermostat, introduce a scent that helps to be able to help you relax and calm down? But also, we worked on projects where we looked to understand how workers were functioning throughout the day and going about their work, and what type of breaks they were taking and when and how, and allowed them to be able to use and lean into the tech to be able to find out which type of breaks and when they should take breaks. I usually work at my desk throughout the day, and I'm eating lunch at my computer in between meetings. The reality is that if we take a 5-10 minute break, we actually have greater brain resiliency and work more efficiently. We don't always do that, though, and we don't know when we actually need it. I think with us, our brain is one of the most powerful organs in our body. It defines who we are. It processes information for at school and at work. And yet we don't really know about how it changes throughout our lifetime. We can access technology today that gives us insights that will allow us to make informed decisions on how we want to be able to go about our day, what interventions we potentially need if we see a pattern or a trend. But at the center of it, the data is user-owned.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about some of the companies that have used your technology. Can you go into a bit more detail there?
Yeah, with SAP, we were looking at trying to provide data and insights that help drive a co-pilot of sorts, and so that was early explorations. With JLL, we were looking at neuroergonomics. How do people work in different environments, and how does that affect creativity, productivity, and similar to some of the earlier discussions, how do we process information? How does that information get delivered to us to really optimize our ability to recall and memorize that?
Well, thank you, and thank you, Kim. You can see from Kim's remarks that there's tremendous opportunity for productivity, for making people more comfortable and safe. But your imagination can run wild too. What can go wrong here? And so I think our focus in the government and the regulatory side is to how do we put guardrails around this at this early stage to make sure that this technology is not abused or used in a way that's harmful. And that's a huge challenge. I've got a bill, and I think you were going to ask about that, Carrie, which is called the No Robo Bosses bill. And that basically will require a human in the loop in critical decisions regarding employees. So if you're going to fire somebody, or if you're going to demote them or punish them in some way, then there has to be a human in the loop one way or another, whether it's for appeals or a human review before the decisions are made. We want to make sure that algorithms aren't making decisions about your lives without any kind of human interaction, without any kind of human oversight. We also want to make sure that neural data isn't used to predict behavior that would cause you to punish an employee. So no predictive algorithms are allowed. And so those are the kind of things, little steps we can take now at this early stage to make sure that people in employment situations are safe and not subject to sort of what might seem like arbitrary decisions.
So I think our take on it is that the technology itself is basically neutral. And the real question is who has the power to reap the benefits? And that's why we always come back to the employer. Because I'll go a little further. I don't think we just need guardrails to protect against harm. We need to make sure that there's a fair distribution of the benefits and minimizing the harm. And so in the employment context, you can see how this would be used to squeeze more productivity out of workers. And rather than the basics of like well, we have a law that's around making sure people take breaks rather than a headband that predicts when you're drowsy, and in the case of Amazon, workplaces shocks you, gives you a little burst. Or I've even was reading about they have, they can do cranial stimulation. And so that's the end point. If you are a business that wants to maximize production, which, by the way, this isn't new. We had Taylorism already. We had Ford, who put scientific management into place. So we're not talking about a game changer. We're talking about something we saw during the Industrial Revolution. And then at that time, because there was a rise of sweatshops and such harm to workers, we had to come back and legislate on the back end. And so I think what we really need to do is, well, the senator and the assembly member are policymakers, we're advocates, but is figure out how we are able to make sure workers and the people who are not the ones controlling the technology not only have a seat at the table, but there's there's a level playing field. So it's not just protecting against harm, but it's being able to maximize the benefits to the public.
Yeah, I know there's some research that was done at MIT that puts a sort of, I think it's like a scarf or like a collar around someone and get a little drowsy and you get shocked, and it sounds a little bit similar to what you were talking about. But I'm pretty sure your bill prohibits a number of different inferences about a person. We know that brain data can give insights into whether somebody has a particular neurological disorder or their state of their health. But your bill also prohibits employers from using automated systems to make inferences about a person's immigration status, veteran status, ancestral history, religion or political beliefs, reproductive status, and or gender or criminal record or credit history. When I think about different predictive systems that are out there, there's the fear of them being remarkably accurate and finding people who are or trying to discriminate against people of a certain class or state. Perhaps more often than not, though, there's just a lot of garbage, that is treated as like a pseudoscience that claims to be able to make these sorts of inferences about people, and that seems to be a big part of the challenge as well. Senator McNerney, I know the moratorium on state AI regulation failed to pass in Congress recently, but do you anticipate that this bill could violate President Trump's AI action plan that was released earlier this month, which threatens to cut state funding if lawmakers pass laws that are considered restrictive to innovation?
Well, I thank you for that question, because there's an important distinction here. And what SB 7, the No Robo Bosses bill, does is prevents some applications, some ways of using inference, whereas the president's directive is aimed more at the developers of AI tools rather than the application. So I think they're really not in parallel paths or in interference with each other, which is good. But there is a real concern and almost a panic if the moratorium was to come about, and I don't think it's dead. I mean, we saw that the Senate voted it down 99-1 or something like that, but what this president wants that, he's going to find a way to push it through. We've seen that over and over again. So it's possible that there will be some sort of moratorium or some sort of preemption of state law on AI regulation. And that's worrisome, because the states are where the laboratory of regulation takes place. I think there were 50 or so AI bills introduced across the states last year. There's going to be more this year. I myself have 4. I don't know, Gail has 1. I mean, we're going to see a lot of that, and a lot of those are going to be not very effective or counterproductive, and some of them are going to be really important. So we don't want to see that happen, but what I did, and I'm going to brag a little bit here, is produce a bill that would bypass all that by being a voluntary AI standards bill. We create standards on the different aspects of AI, the data standards, watermarking standards, healthcare. There's bound to be many different fields that need standards, so that we voluntary standards. It wouldn't be a regulatory bill at all. We just create standards in the private sector. And if you're familiar with UA or IEEE or those standards organizations, that's what this would do for AI.
Yeah, thank you. And Kim, Emotive follows some voluntary standards as it relates to privacy around neural data as well, right? I want to mention really quick, though, by the way, California, I think, is only one of 3 states with some form of protection for people's neural data built into state law currently, and that your bill would advance that. But sorry, yeah, Emotive has some.
So we are GDPR compliant, and we apply that across the entire footprint of how we handle data. We work alongside the Neural Rights Foundation and other policymakers, the OECD, to really educate them in terms of the technology and take into account some of the concerns that they have, so that we're making sure that we're designing products ethically and providing the capacity for individuals to really have ownership of their data, to be able to opt into and provide explicit consent. We don't sell the neural data that is shared through to us, and when it is shared, it is de-identified and aggregated, and so that we're not applying any kind of PID back to our system.
And something that I mentioned at the top that I think is really intriguing. Kim, can you talk a bit about what is it, MW20 and Emanate, and why your company chose to focus on a form factor for this sensors that can detect brainwaves in a pair of earbuds?
Yeah, traditional EEG sensors. So EEG's been around for over a century. So what we've done is made it portable, wireless. 15 years ago, we introduced the Epoch X. That's a 14-sensor system. It's really been used widely within research to be able to advance the understanding of the human brain. And there's, I think, over 40,000 published papers now that have leveraged the technology. But we really wanted to democratize access to it. We wanted the ability to have everybody have the benefit of the technology, and we also wanted to responsibly build algorithms that reflected the whole community, not just people that have had access to it. And so we looked at miniaturizing the form factor. I've got the Emanate here. It's a headphone, microphone with in-ear EEG to be able to give you real-time insights back into your cognitive load, your stress balance, your mental activity. This is all delivered through a personal app that's on your phone. So similar to other wearable device where we're measuring our steps, our sleep, our weight, what we're eating, this gives us the capacity to be able to really understand our changing brain dynamics and make informed decisions.
Yeah. And there's a number of different form factors out there, I think, for these kinds of sensors. Some of them are like helmets. I think you mentioned, Sarah, the headbands. Smart Cap, I think, is the company that does that. But I spoke with a researcher, Alexander, I believe his last name Keys. Check the article in a couple weeks; it'll be right. But he was looking at, the form factor being a very important part of people who interact with employees, whether or not they would be willing to deal with neural technology in the workplace. He referred to it as a cyborg effect. Summarily, across industries, people wearing, cumbersome AR headsets or something with these sensors in them, people were just like, no, I'm good. It's a hard pass for consumers. But in some instances, for example, financial advice they found, and this is early research, that people were more likely if they informed them why this technology was in use to share more information or speak more at length if neurotechnology was used at all. Sarah, I wanted to ask, how are labor-fed union members encountering automated decision-making systems in the workplace today? And can you tell me about this? I think Annette mentioned the trio of bills that were proposed earlier this year. Can you talk a bit more about those, what those would do, and the particular focus of those?
I mean, I think we've learned that over many, many meetings with members that pretty much almost every worker in the state is encountering some form of either automated decision-making or AI-enabled technology, whether it's used to replace part of their job or all of their job, generally de-skilling, whether it's self-checkout or automated vehicles, or especially in warehouses and a lot of low-wage jobs where it's used for surveillance and management. We find that a lot of employers are outsourcing management to robots. That's why Senator McNerney's bill is one in our package, which is there are a lot of important decisions being made about workers' livelihoods that are made without any human intervention. There was a recent survey that was done of employers. They found 20% of managers are using AI and automated decision-making systems to make decisions about hiring, discipline, and firing with no human oversight. That's 20%. So the rest of them are using it, they might just be checking it. Although we have to be very careful about algorithmic bias, where it's like, well, if the machine says it, the machine must be right. So that's a huge impact. And then you talk about other areas like the entertainment industry, like some of the major strikes were over the use of AI in writing and acting, but we also see it in below the line crew. Makeup artists and costume designers are being replaced really fast, cinematographers, animators. So all the people creating art are being replaced. And in healthcare, it's really moving very quickly and is kind of frightening. We have nurses talking about how they do AI monitoring where it is, first of all, misdiagnosis is huge, but then also just the level of coming in and having to disturb the patient all the time, where the nurse is like, actually, the best thing you can do is let them sleep for 4 hours and not have a bell constantly ringing to come and check them. So it's just it is so widespread, it is really hard to identify. We tried to do bills where we addressed industry separately. We had a public sector bill, we've done healthcare bills, we focused on grocery, trying to look at the industry because the impacts are so unique. But at this point, it's so widespread, we felt like we had to come back. The other fear we have, I know that the gentleman who spoke before me was not as worried about this, but I think AI is chopping off the bottom rungs of the career ladder and just setting them on fire to fuel data centers. I am more afraid that we are just not gonna create any more jobs than eliminate jobs. And we are gonna have massive youth unemployment, people in the prime years of their earning careers trying to start families that won't be able to. And then we'll have these massive gaps where no one came up to be a paralegal, no one came up to be a teacher, no one came up to be anything. And so then as people are retiring, we're just gonna have a lack of everything. And so this is a real existential threat to us. We are very worried about the impact and the dislocation and disruption on the economy. So the bills that we're doing, we had a package of 3. Senator McNerney's is the center, cornerstone. We had 2 others that are dealing with the use of surveillance and ownership of data. We really wanted to make sure that worker data, which is being sucked up and is like the new gold, was not even belonging to the worker and the worker making money off of it, which would be better, was just that employers couldn't sell or lease or transfer that data. And we also had some other kind of the most invasive forms of surveillance we wanted to limit. That bill died very early on. We clearly hit a nerve. People, clearly surveillance is a big deal and selling data. We have another smaller bill, which is just around kind of limiting the most invasive use of technology in the workplace and limiting the use of AI-enabled surveillance, because that's where it's really the eye in the sky that can be everywhere at all times, tracking not just like, where you are physically, but your actual brain waves or your radio sensor. And that bill is limping along, so we'll see what happens. But we are pretty committed to coming back every year, because more and more we just see the threat to our social fabric.
Oh, thank you, Sarah, for your insights there. There seems to be an arms race in AI with regard to productivity, with regard to using AI to enhance worker productivity or displacing workers. Now, I was just talking to one of the big AI companies here in San Francisco this morning, and they were saying, well, they're separating employment data, not employee data, but what people do, to separate tasks, to understand what tasks can be enhanced by AI and what tasks need to be done specifically by humans. And that way they can use AI to enhance worker productivity and increase the number of people working. And then on the other hand, of course, there's the intent just to use AI to displace people. So in my mind, there's an arms race. Are we going to be able to use AI to help, or is it just going to hurt, or is there this battle going on that hasn't been resolved, and it's up to folks like Gail and myself to make sure that it gets resolved properly?
Yeah, and Sarah, I can't recall which of the three bills, because bill numbers come in and out of my head like, I don't know, write it down. They change all the time. It's that was related to, I think, surveillance of like work, like break rooms and things of that nature as well. And it certainly comes to mind when thinking about use of neural data in the example that I mentioned early on of this possibility that if people are required or are using these devices on a regular basis, that they might develop the fear that their thoughts of union membership or working in an organized fashion could be under threat. One of the things I was interested in asking about that I feel like I tend to ask when I'm speaking with folks in labor, it feels like at some point within the last few years, there was a time at which it became clear that there was a focus on like every union should begin talking about AI as part of collective bargaining agreements. That every negotiation, every sit down at the table should involve the subject. When did that happen? What do you think?
That's a really good question. I think it happened at different times in different industries. I'm going to give another shout out to Lisa Kresge at the UC Berkeley Labor Center. She's an incredible database of all of the collective bargaining provisions. I've learned a lot of it just from the definitions people use. And I'm not totally sure. I mean, the AFL, the National AFL, our mothership, has a technology institute, and so has been working on this for a long time. They have partnerships with Carnegie Mellon, they have a partnership with Microsoft. But I do think it depends on when it hit the industry. I know in the entertainment industry, they got hit really early on. They actually had been negotiating when digital cameras came in, right? When they went from like film. So they've been doing that for a while. The Teamsters like to say, they were like, well, we used to drive horse and buggy, and so we had to negotiate when they came in with the engine. So it's not like negotiating technology is not new. I think the speed and the scope and power is what's new, and trying to wrap our head around how it's being used. That's the other thing. I think we're we are trying to build notification into a lot of the legislation we do because these tools are invisible sometimes. The surveillance is invisible. The AI that they're embedding in things is invisible. So it's harder than when you replace a horse with a truck. Like, that's something you can easily see. And so a lot of this is like, okay, we need to have the disclosure of when these tools are coming in, or even before. We worked on a bill a while ago to require that transit agencies, when they're bringing in any kind of technology that changed the nature of work, they would have to give the union advance notice. So there was time to prepare and to put input into the RFP. So.
Yeah, and I know as a journalist and someone who's trying to follow instances of when a person is harmed by AI, that lack of disclosure is most people just don't know it happened at all. They don't know they were discriminated against, they were denied a job because of the technology, or denied health care, or anything along those lines. We're going to get into one or two more questions. I'm just sending out a little 5-10 minute warning to the audience here to get ready for your own questions. But one last thing that comes to mind, Sarah. I was speaking with Lorena in January, and I think it came up in the last panel as well, of similar work underway in other states. Is that part of like a larger strategy for Labor Federation to try and push through individual states in sort of allyship with Labor Fed and other states to continue regulating this technology?
Yeah, Lorena Gonzalez, who's the president of the California Labor Federation, my boss, is actually the co-chair of a new working group, a national working group, along with Chrissy Lynch, who's the head of Massachusetts. And the idea is to wrap our head around it and to figure out what would be a national policy on the use of tech in the workplace. And there are things happening in every single state of various levels of what workers care about, and the bills are moving. We're trying to figure out if there's model legislation we can all do. I think Senator McNerney's bill is going to be a model for that. We're hoping to get to other states. And each union has moved their own legislation. I know that transit workers, anyone who drives, has been really ahead of this because of autonomous vehicles. And so I know the AFL is trying to compile all of that so that we can get out to various states. What are the models? And also looking at, the other big thing is dynamic pricing. That's been of interest because it's such a huge impact on workers as consumers. And then the threat of the fact that you walk into a store, they're like, we can use this neurological data to figure out you're really hungry and you're craving a Snickers, so we're going to jack up the price, and then we're going to get rid of the checkers, and you can just walk out and we'll scan your body, and then on your Apple Watch we'll just access your bank account. And so that's a fear, like that seamlessness of like no friction, and the impact it has on workers as consumers and workers as workers is a real threat. So we're looking at kind of both of those aspects.
And is that language about neurological data as part of the efforts in other states as well?
I know California, what is it, Colorado and New York, we have protections.
Colorado, Montana,
yeah. Yeah, we would like to see that move. I didn't even know we had slipped that in to the statute, but it's in Mr. McNerney's bill, Senator McNerney's bill as well. And we were informed by one of the consultants, they're like, you should use matching language to what we already had. And I was like, I didn't know we had it.
And then one last question for the panel as a whole, really. What are some essential things that you think California should consider when it comes to neural data and frontline workers in the future?
Well, I think, thank you. That's a sort of the big elephant in the room. We need to make sure that the data is protected, that there's privacy laws. California has its own privacy law. It's a good law. But we need to make sure that it's strong enough to protect neural data, which is basically about you. That's the most personal thing you have is your brain, and we need to make sure that we can protect that. I think that's the obvious thing, but are there beneficial ways to use that we can encourage? So there's that tension. You want to do something that's safe, but you don't want to do it so safe that it can't be used. So I think that's our big challenge.
Coming from industry, from our standpoint, we advocate for regulation and guardrails around this technology and the neuroethics and data and privacy. We want to be able to educate people in terms of what the technology can do. Today, it measures the function of the brain, but it can't actually identify what you're thinking or that you're hungry.
Or manipulate thoughts.
Or manipulate thoughts. We're for at least our technology, it's passively measuring and it's not invasive. We want to continue to innovate because we do see benefits that everyone can get from technology like this, but definitely in a responsible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need regulation to share in the benefits, and neural data especially. It is just a deep, deep part of us. And so that's really important. I know the GDRP has pieces of it in it. I do think we need to be careful around when we talk about consent or opt-in, opt-out at the workplace, because the power dynamic is so different than in any other situation. Literally, your livelihood depends on if your boss asks you to do something, whether you say yes or no. And so those protections, I think, we need to pay particular attention at that and recognize that that dynamic is there, especially in low-wage workplaces.
Awesome, thank you. So to you, dear audience, any questions?
Thank you so much. Olga and I are in local government. And we are just wondering, with the changing dynamics nationally, the loss of guardrails there, and states trying to continue being the laboratories of innovation. From your perspective, what is the space for local actors, local governments to be able to ensure that within the local governments themselves, there is continued research around appropriate guardrails, responsible uses of AI in government?
Councilmember Trigo been very humble. He is a council member in Berkeley, and I'm his chief of staff, and we also have our intern here, Samuel. We're working actively on the legislation for Berkeley, and would love to hear your opinion on what can we incorporate into the legislation beyond us advocating and sending letters in support of state bills and also working with League of California Cities. What can we do as local legislators? Thank you so much.
I'll take a stab at that. That's a tough question, but I think what I'd like to recommend is using standards. If you look at standards, what are the standards that are applicable that would be protective, and make sure that those standards are being adhered to by businesses that are operating in your jurisdiction? That would be one way to do it. There's also the revenue issue, and I think Sarah was talked a lot about the who benefits from the technology. Is there a revenue approach to answering that question? And are we talking about universal basic income or some other way to make sure that people aren't being harmed because of the displacements that we might be seeing in the future?
I think the other piece, I believe the city of Santa Clara or San Jose, there's one that has something around, is it?
It's about the Gov AI Coalition.
Yeah.
There in the back there.
Oh, there. Yeah,
San Jose.
That's cool. Oh, San Jose. Great. You guys are awesome. We sent it to our national AFL. But procurement too, like the state and local government buys lots of technology. And so the idea that you could use your procurement power, your dollar, especially if you're in League of Cities and can organize a bunch of big cities to say, hey, here's the kind of products we want to buy, here are the standards that we're going to have in using those, that can be really powerful.
Yeah, and the GovAI Coalition is having a lot of conversations about how local governments can effectively adopt safeguards and
Hi.
guardrails.
Mary Ann Groen. I am District Director for Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, just new on that. Used to work for City of San Jose for 14 years. So I have a question for you, Tech. When tech only works towards job efficiency, what happens to the concern for individuals' health and happiness? And selling neural data, you say that your company's not going to sell it, but as we saw with 23andMe, when you sell your company, does that non-sell transfer to the next company, which it didn't with 23andMe?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we're working alongside many different policymakers on to be able to make sure that we protect the individual and their data, even in instances where that happens. For our tech, we're really focusing on the health and wellness. The companion app that comes along with it delivers the insights to the user around stress balance, being able to understand the changing dynamics of the brain. It doesn't track productivity per se. I think that productivity or the ability to focus better is the benefit from having a healthy brain, but we are largely targeting a health and wellness use case for our tech.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Keynes. I serve as the Chief Innovation Officer and Budget Director for the City of San Jose under Mayor Matt Mahan. Thank you for the shout out to the GovAI Coalition. It's now grown to over 700 public agencies. Phase one, as you mentioned, was all about procurement, so we created a set of standardized procurement documents that help you guide you through the process. And stage two, we're actually building models together, specifically around language translation, object detection. So it's really great to see governments come together. I was really moved by your kind of comments around collective bargaining, and so I started thinking about the role of the consumer as well. And I'm curious, do you think that in the next 10 or 20 years, as more displacement happens, consumers will also become a valid part of how we kind of advocate and vote with our dollar in the same way that people choose, let's say, fair trade clothing manufacturers versus fast fashion Shein? Do we think that we'll see that, or do we feel that people have seen everything Amazon is doing and they're kind of still moving forward with Amazon Prime? Like, just curious if your thoughts on that.
I have to get your card because I'm so interested in the work you're doing. It's very cool. I think it's hard. The dynamic pricing is really hard because you don't know what's happening. And there's a ton of bills in the legislature right now addressing this. And we saw it with that company that was, I can't remember the name of it, what was the rental company?
RealPage?
RealPage. Where there was basically algorithmic collusion. And that's not always the case, but dynamic pricing, you don't know what it is that is causing you to have that price. It's like you don't know it's because you're in San Francisco with a Mac that you're getting a higher price, or the fact that you're in a lift and your battery's low. So they're like, wow, you really, so I think that's hard. I do think that consumer unions and consumer federations are great. We are part of the Tech Equity Coalition that they spoke about at the last panel. And we love that because we get to be with all these groups we don't normally work with the ACLU and Consumer Reports and all kinds of groups. And there's a real intersection between what consumers are seeing and what workers are seeing. And so I do think there's great opportunity there.
Yeah, that disclosure really feels like a step in the sort of path to redress, or journalists being able to find the people who were impacted, or people being able to say, how the use of automation impacted their lives. If you don't know what's happening, you don't know that you were denied health care or all the other things that can be influenced. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is Leah Mimoun. I work at a crisis communications advisory firm here in the building, and I have a background working in media with labor unions. I was wondering if you could speak a bit to what it has been like working on legislation or just communicating about legislation with Republicans on this issue, and just if you've had any luck working across the aisle, and if you think that there's any possibility in the future for bipartisan consensus on worker protections.
Which one of us are you redirecting? No. Yes, I have 4 AI bills. One is partisan, at least perceived to be partisan. That's SB 7. It's very controversial. We're getting significant pushback from chambers of commerce, from industry groups that don't want to see, that think it'll reduce their ability to manage and so on. And that has a partisan response. My bill 833, SB 833, which requires humans in the loop in critical infrastructure, is very bipartisan. I think I got unanimous votes in all the committees in both the Senate and the Assembly floor. So yeah, it just depends on the specifics of the legislation, and when it comes to which bills are going to get pushback from one side or the other. You know, if it's going to affect industry or businesses in what they perceive to be a negative way, then there's going to be pushback from the conservatives. If it intrudes in privacy, it's going to get pushback from the liberal side. So, you know, it really just depends on the type of legislation and, you know, the kind of relationships you have and how you work it. You know, if I can get a strong labor backing, that makes the bill easier to push through. And if I get backing from 1 or 2 businesses, it makes it all the better. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that's hard and fast any one specific political party. But the federal side, it's a little different. You know, the president and a lot of his coterie is pushing for less and less regulation on AI. And so I think that's going to be sort of something we see coming down from the federal side. And as I mentioned before, it could be that there's some sort of federal preemption in our future.
Hi, my name is John Deanna. I'm the managing editor at CalMatters, and I'd like to thank all the members of the panel and my colleagues for their hard work today, and thanks to the Irvine Foundation for hosting us. I have a question that's a little tangential, but I wonder if you could speak to the potential for neurotechnology and AI to improve workplaces by making them more inclusive. I'm thinking particularly for people with maybe speech and hearing disabilities, and whether you see any threats to research on that front from the current round of funding cuts that the administration is going through.
Yeah, I can speak to the technology, what it can do. So brain-computer interfaces, there's a component of the technology outside of just measuring the different cognitive states, is you can actually apply a brain pattern to be able to move physical and virtual objects. And so I think that is one component of the technology that is already helping special needs people that don't have the capacity to be able to swipe, click, or switch. And then in terms of like neurodiversity, the ability to be able to support certain conditions like ADD, ADHD, and help individuals to self-regulate, to be able to overcome burnout or just maintain health and wellness, but absolutely being able to apply it towards different ways of thinking, different conditions is certainly something that we've been working really closely with, and really try to work with various partners to be able to explore how we can continue to service and develop technologies for that.
Yeah, I know that some of the conversations that I've had with companies that are developing this technology look at serving the needs of people who lack mobility or control of their muscle function anymore, and allowing them the ability to control, the mention of Slack and Outlook that I had in the beginning. That was talking about serving their needs and approaching this from the perspective of universal design is the conversation that I was having with Cognixion, is a company based in Santa Barbara that's developing a AR headset that has eye movement tracking and a number of EEG sensors inside of it to better follow somebody's brain waves and to have that contribute to what they're able to do to work autonomously in the workplace and to continue to work, and so the way they talked about it was that this was work that's by solving for that user, then there might be applications in the workplace more broadly that serve everyone else. Sort of like how using a curb cutout that was there in place there for people who are low vision, or it serves everyone.
One more?
Yeah, but I was gonna, yeah.
Okay. One more question.
One more?
I'll just go. I apologize in advance. I know this is kind of a hard to answer question, but it seems like fundamentally a lot of the problem here is that managers or those in charge of deciding whether or not to deploy a certain type of technology are unaware of or unwilling to consider the non-monetary value that workers produce. So I represent education workers where it's very hard to assess and quantify the value of our work. We have testing and grades, but those are flawed, to put it mildly. And so we're very vulnerable to all this technology because someone comes in and says you can save this much money with this many fewer workers. It's going to be a very attractive option. Is there any way for neural technology or some other form of technology to do a better job of quantifying and assessing that non-monetary value that workers produce? So in our case, the human connection that a teacher may have with a student has all sorts of benefits down the line in terms of emotional regulation or the ability to critically think or lead a rich and meaningful life. These are all very hard things to measure. Is there any way that this technology can instead of being used to replace those workers, instead be used to better measure those non-monetary benefits that workers create through their work? And then that can be used to not only help inform the decisions that managers make, but also the decisions that regulators make as well.
Yes, and I would love to talk to you after. And my husband's actually a public high school teacher in Willow Glen High School, so would love to explore that more with you.
Right here.
It's a quick one.
Yeah.
Sorry, also an educator, a professor at a local community college, and it's kind of a more philosophical question. Because I know that, we have people working on regulation, we have people working on tech, and a lot of this comes down to like consent, about our data, our privacy. And I'm curious, we talked about things like dynamic pricing. You have technology that works on people at a neurological level. So I'm curious, in the work that you do, either developing legislation or tech, how do you understand or define consent? Right? Because a lot of times things are happening to us that we don't really understand. So if you could just speak a little bit about what consent means within this context where these technologies are working on our brains in ways that we might not really be fully aware.
I can speak to the...
Good question.
Yeah. I can speak to the tech side. So over the last 15 years, we've largely been working along research groups to be able to conduct studies on humans using our technology. And so we have to go through a series of IRB approvals. And so we're very aware of the consent forms and the information that is needed. From our standpoint, when we're developing the technology, it isn't about one quick click through before you download it. It's making sure that we continually educate you in terms of, are you sure you want to share this data? And making sure that throughout the engagement with the user, we're checking in, we're putting up prompts to ensure that they understand how their data is being used, and that's present throughout the applications and the software that we're developing.
It's a great question. I was actually reading an article about the GDRP, and they have there's varying degrees of consent, but mainly it has to do with power imbalance versus like addiction. Like I'm addicted to Instagram, and so I would consent to anything to get on. That's hypothetical, but totally hypothetical. But yeah, no, that's a crazy question, especially when you're dealing with like young people who grew up with these things surrounding them, and it's so like you don't have to write a word. I was like, whoa, okay. It's a different mindset. And so I think that's a key question. I don't know, I can't answer it. Hope someone does.
Thank you so much to our panel for this enlightening discussion. Thank you for everyone for being here. Please give them a round of applause. Emotive Chief Product Officer Kim Olds, California Federation of Labor Unions Sarah Flock, and State Senator Jerry McNerney.